Do you love books but don't have time to read them? Do you wish you could listen to your favorite stories while driving, working out, or doing chores? If so, you need Audible, the world's largest library of audiobooks and podcasts. With Audible, you can enjoy unlimited access to thousands of titles across genres and categories from bestsellers to classics, thrillers, romance, fiction, and nonfiction. You can also discover new and exclusive content from Audible Originals, featuring original stories and performances by celebrities and authors. Plus, you can download your audiobooks and podcasts offline for listening anywhere, anytime, on any device. And with Audible Plus, you can get even more benefits, such as unlimited listening to select audiobooks and podcasts, free exchanges and returns, and a 30-day free trial. So what are you waiting for? Join Audible today and start your listening adventure. Visit the show notes to support the show and get your free Audible trial today. Thank you for your support.
And now, on with the show.
Gentlemen, what's a comedy film that you find deeply moving?
I have to go with one in particular, and it's the one that you wouldn't think is the one that's more emotionally affecting, but I'm picking Superbad. That was my high school experience. When anybody talks about high school movies and what it was really like being in high school, when I was in high school and my friends were in high school, we were like those three guys in Superbad. We were losers, but we were funny, so we were kind of tolerated. We had like weird flirtations with girls that were out of our league, but we were too stupid to realize that like we could have gotten with them. At every moment of our lives, literally it was all about how can we get fucked? Like, what do we do? How do we do it? We got to go to a party and get drunk, and we'll be with drunk girls, and they'll fuck us, and all of that. So that alone is like, it transports me back into a time that I'm not like particularly wistful about. I didn't love high school. I feel like I've grown more and more over time, but like it's just like, it's high school, man. You know, things were a little easier back then. I didn't have to worry about like rent and car payments. But then it ends on this really, I think, rich emotional moment of these two boys realizing that how important they were to each other, but that they're going to move on. They're going to different colleges. They're going to have different experiences. And that's something me and my friends at the time, we really had to reckon with. We had a hard time with it. We all tried to be friends for as long as we could during college and after college, but it really did. There was a schism. We all grew and had different experiences, and I'm not friends with most of them anymore. So it really just brings me back to this more innocent time, more dopey time. We were, I cannot stress this enough, we were fucking horny morons. But it gets to, and it's that one of those things that Rogan is really good at when he's cooking, which is finding the heart and the emotion in these vulgar, hyper intelligent, yet also really emotionally stupid characters. And I really think Superbad is one of the most like, one of the movies I look at most, and I'm like, yeah, that is like to a T my life. Like, that is like what high school was for me. So I had to pick Superbad for this one.
I was thinking about this in terms of there are films that are ostensibly comedies that spoke to me a lot when I was a younger person, like some of Woody Allen's films or The Graduate, obviously things like that. But of course, I've watched those things so much. I've watched them to death. Even some of the Chaplin films, silent films, watched them to death so much that sometimes I don't feel it anymore because I'm so used to it. But there is a movie that is a comedy. It's a light film. It's a very silly film. There's a man on top of his house who thinks he's a sea captain firing cannons and silly musical numbers and all of that. That when I revisited it a couple years ago and then revisited it again this year, I was stunned at how much it floored me. And how it's gone from a movie that like I watched to giggle at as a child to a movie that I think is profound and deeply emotional. And is also the greatest live action film that the Disney company ever made, which is Mary Poppins. A movie that, again, it's silly, it's light, and it's very easy to write that off as kid stuff, but Saving Mr. Banks kind of does it in a very saccharine way when they address it, but it is true. Like, you hit a certain age where you realize she's not there to save the kid, she's there to save Mr. Banks, and you hit a certain age where it destroys you. I just think it's such an extraordinary achievement, a film like that can be very funny and fun for children, and then you hit a certain age and suddenly it speaks to a profound truth. So my answer to that is Mary Poppins. Every year since 1989, the Library of Congress has selected 25 films to add to the National Film Registry. The criteria? The films must be culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Each week on You're Missing Out, we take a look at one of these films to try and get to the heart of why they were selected and why they still matter.
This week, actor Jae Kim returns to the show as we discuss Charlie Chaplin's iconic 1931 film, City Lights.
Our guest today is an actor and a return guest for our show, good friend of ours. Jae Kim joins us on the program to talk about City Lights. Jae, thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you for having me again. This is going to be another highlight of my year, and glad to be back.
Highlight of I'll be modest, our June. I might have higher moments than this. I don't want to. I don't want to set my sights too short, but if it is the highlight of my year, it's still a good highlight. I'll be honest.
I appreciate the honesty. I like that.
Hey, there's 6 months left in the year. Who knows? Maybe I could finally, feel joy. Who knows?
You guys could get John Cochelle on again. That'd be a bigger highlight. So I don't blame you.
I just want to talk about the abject tension, Jae, because now, last time you were on was our first season. We did not have video for ourselves. So none of us could see producer Kyle, and now we all can. And Jae, I promise you, keep an eye on Kyle as we record, because he actively keeps track of what he has to edit and what he has to edit out of what Tom says as we go. And when Tom went, there's still 6 months left in the year, maybe I can finally, and there was a pause, I watched as Kyle just for a moment went, is he going to say something that we can't have in here? And if so, how do I cover up this entire segment?
It's one of my favorite games to play. It's one of my absolute favorite games to play is let's see Kyle get an ulcer in real time.
Jae, thank you so much for coming back on. And not only are you back on this season, I got to have one of my favorite things, which is I always love, I love anytime we get to have anybody on, and I send them a list of films, and sometimes I send the list of films to people, and people go, I think I can talk about blank, or, you know what, I guess probably blank. But I always love a moment when I send over a list of films and you get the response like I got from you, which is like, this, absolutely, City Lights, like, I have such a connection to this, I have such an emotional response to this. That's always one of my favorite things, so I'm so glad that we were able to make this happen.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I'm glad you guys sent over that list. It just made sense to me. Chaplin, actually, you guys might not notice, but he's the first filmmaker I was introduced to as a kid. Actually, my dad introduced me to. We got this old antique projector, and the first film that came with that projector was actually The Kid by Charlie Chaplin.
Oh, wow,
which is obviously
yeah.
now we're talking. Yeah, actually, and it was cool. I watched it as a kid, and I just responded to it instinctually and emotionally, and it was the first film I think I've watched in my life, I want to say. And Chaplin was the first filmmaker I was introduced to.
So I'm glad you said that up top so that people don't think that we're only going to have you on for films where boxing is a tangential subplot. Because last time you were on for On the Waterfront, where no boxing occurs, but boxing just kind of looms over it. And of course, in this, there's a famous boxing match where very little boxing occurs. So, I wanted to make sure people didn't think that was a trend.
Hey. Boxing does occur in this fight. I saw more boxing in that match than I ever saw in a Floyd Mayweather fight. So let's be honest here.
Oh.
And we will get into it, but I have a note that is just all caps, Charlie does the Goldberg spear, which is one of my favorite things. That Chaplin just busts out the Bill Goldberg spear into somebody else. God bless him. But we'll get there. We'll get into all of that. Jae, you just talked about your connection with Chaplin in the broader sense. When was the first time if you remember, when was the first time you saw City Lights?
I think I was. It was very young. My dad loves antiques, and he loves showing me old stuff. He has a whole collection of just old music. He loves classical music. He loves to show me. So I want to say I was like 9 or 8 years old probably when I first saw City Lights. He wasn't a huge. He wasn't like a Chaplin. He wasn't Chaplin obsessed, but he just thought it was a fun thing to show me, and I thought I wasn't gonna like it, but it's just because it's a silent picture. There's gonna be no sound, and it's a very old film, black and white. But for some reason, I don't know how Chaplin does it, but you watch any Chaplin scene, and most of the time you're probably just gonna laugh, and sometimes he actually gets you like emotionally. Like I don't know how he does it, but you just respond to it in a very human way for some reason, and that's how I did it as a kid. I think it just made sense to me. There was nothing really deep that I saw anything about it. I just responded to it on a very surface level, and I just got it. And I was like, wow, this is funny. And this is ridiculous. This is funny. This is funny. This is sad, ridiculous. So it made sense to me. So I think around 9 or 8 years old is when I first saw City Light.
I mean, I'll say this, and then we'll go to Tom, because I know you're Tom. I know you're much kind of more recent coming to Chaplin, or at least like I don't think you had when we did Modern Times in season 1, you hadn't seen that before, and I don't know, had you seen City Lights before this?
No, I haven't. This was my first time with City Lights.
For me, I remember funny enough, Jay, when you said that, I have the same first Chaplin as you. I have the kid as well, and the reason I saw it, I remember being in like early middle school, going to Walmart with my mom, and in their like discount movie bin, they had a 4-movie collection, 2 Chaplin and 2 Keaton. It was Tilly's Punctured Romance and The Kid for Chaplin, Steamboat Bill and the General for Keaton. And I think it was like $10. Wow. And as a kid, I was like, that's a steal. 4 movies for $10. I got to get them. Of course, not realizing as a kid, these are all in the public domain. They just cranked them out. And I remember like sitting on my grandmother's carpet and watching The Kid for the first time. And again, I much like you, I was kind of like, I don't really know what a silent movie is going to be like. I don't know any of that. And I got invested in that. And then maybe a year or 2 later, I saw City Lights for the first time, because in 8th grade, I got really into the AFI list, the concept of the original AFI list back in the day. And I wanted to watch every movie on it, because I viewed that as kind of like, oh, this is a list of great and important films, and if I watch all 100 of these, I can at least feel conversant in cinema. And that obsession with movie lists and going through every single one obviously stopped there and has not carried over all the way to this show. No, not at all. But I remember watching it, and City Lights on the AFI list, and they, of all people, they're talking about the movie, and Woody Allen is one of the talking heads, and he says, well, I think that's the greatest romance movie ever made, and that ending is the greatest ending a movie has ever had. And I think especially when you're like 12, 13, if you hear somebody go, this is the greatest blank, you immediately go, well, I have to see whatever the hell that is. Like, I guess this guy said the greatest, It's a little like Buddy the Elf saying it's the best coffee in the country, or whatever it is, coffee in the city in Elf. Right. I don't remember the exact. And I sought it out, and I do remember just being floored by it, and really just it all. I mean, that ending especially. We'll get into the ending a lot, but like, just once you get hit with that, you're just like, oh, this is something special. This is a magic trick that he pulls off.
I agree. I mean, I don't know how he does it, but you forget that Chaplin's like an emotional filmmaker.
Yeah.
Too. And he's the first director that made me cry as a kid. I watched The Kid by Charlie Chaplin. I think it's my first movie I ever watched. And he somehow just works his magic and does it.
So before we get more into City Lights specifically and how we felt about it then and now, let's talk about what the National Film Registry had to say about it. And strap in, boys. Here's a registry statement for us. In this story of a blind flower girl, Virginia Sherrill, and the tramp who makes sacrifices for her, Charlie Chaplin, Chaplin deftly combines comedy with pathos. Despite the movie industry's embrace of talking pictures, Chaplin held on to the pantomime style that defined his screen persona, and the film earned great critical acclaim and box office profits. That's it. For whatever reason...
Big brain to write that one out.
Like... To be clear, Jay, this season especially, I have been reading novels for some of these goddamn movies. They have written paragraphs on these things, and for some reason on City Lights, they were just like, I don't know, just tell them what the plot is and tell them it did good.
I was drinking my Snapple, waiting for you to just go into like this whole riff, and I was just okay. That's it. All right.
Yeah.
Wow.
The Registry, if we ever get to the point where we can get someone from the National Film Registry on here, I feel like a solid 10 minutes are just going to be us going, what was the deal with this one? Explain this to me. Can we redo this one? The quotes here are just weird. This one doesn't even sound like you like the movie. This one drags one of the actors. That's my favorite. The one in Shadow of a Doubt. Oh, no, not Shadow of a Doubt. Which one is it? There's one of them where it just shit talks one of the actors. Where it just goes, yeah, the performance is great, except this one. Why? Then again, if there was ever going to be a registry statement that shit talked one of the actors, it would be City Lights. Because I don't know if you guys came across this. Charlie Chaplin shit talked Virginia Sherrill constantly and tried to fire her off the film. Actually did fire her off the film.
I did not.
I read about that.
Yeah, Virginia Sherrill.
That's crazy. Yeah.
She was not an actress. He came across her. He hadn't figured out who he was going to cast for the blind girl. He met her at, of all things, a boxing match where she was seated next to him. And he decided, oh, you're going to be in the movie. Reports vary on what exactly went wrong. We know for a fact that he called her for an early shoot time and she was like, I can't make it for that. I have a hair appointment or something like that. She just kind of like brushed it off like whatever. And he was like, fuck it, she's fired. And he was a dick on set, but like he was like, that's it, she's fired. And he tried to replace her with Georgette from the Gold Rush, but then they determined they'd already shot too much. But it kind of sounds like the most generous kind of interpretation is Chaplin is a notorious perfectionist and everything is in service of the movie and you drop everything else for the movie. And Virginia Sherrill seemed very much like, this is a thing I'm doing, but I'm not going to let it dominate my life. And they just butted heads throughout this whole goddamn thing.
I couldn't really tell. They had great chemistry on the film, actually. I had to read up on that to find that out, actually. But that is true. That is true.
I think they're good together. I mean, I even had it in my notes as I was doing this. Like, to me, the epitome of like Chaplin love interest on film is Paulette Goddard in Modern Times, and I think that's in no doubt due to the fact that they were actually genuinely married in in real life. They had actual chemistry, but I do think that to me it almost serves the movie that they don't have as much of a connection in this, because I think if you felt an undeniable, palpable attraction between the two of them, you don't necessarily get that beautiful suspense at the end when he's looking at her and she goes, "It's you," and you kind of see on his face, he's like, "Oh shit, she's never going to see me as anything more than just a tramp," which is, I think, again, we're not going to skip right to the ending right away, but we're going to spend plenty of time on ending talk.
Well, there's got to be a distance just based on the premise of it.
Yeah.
She's blind. I mean, there's going to be a bit of that distance because, I mean, it's also just like, well, she's really not in a lot of the movie. So a lot of it's kind of on what he's willing to do more than their actual connection. There just has to be this like distance and, like you said, the suspense of, well, if she actually does see him, is there actually going to be a connection, blah blah blah. So yeah, I mean, I didn't get any of the off the camera stuff watching the movie at all, but I didn't think they particularly lit the screen ablaze. It was a bit muted, but I think that works in this movie's favor just based on what it's going for with its story and everything.
Interestingly, the blind storyline, I came across this, and this I thought was so interesting. The whole blind storyline was not originally conceived for City Lights. If you look at Chaplin's career, right? So he has The Kid, which is technically his first feature, unless you want to count Shoulder Arms, which is like 45 minutes and not really much of a film. But he has a Kid, and then The Gold Rush, which I think many people remember fondly as like the ultimate Chaplin film. He directs Woman in Paris, which he's not in. And then he has The Circus. The Circus is the film he makes sort of immediately before this, which is, of the Tramp pictures. He conceived a blind storyline for The Circus. Originally, the plot of that film was going to involve his character, an aging clown, who is going blind and doesn't want to admit it to his daughter. So he keeps pretending that all of the actual accidents he has in his blindness are really pratfalls. So that was originally where this whole thing was going to be about, like, blindness and mistaken identity and all of that. And as he kept developing it, he realized, well, it's actually better if it's the tramp interacting with someone who's blind, because then you get this class distinction and all that. And that's the genesis of City Lights. I think that's interesting in part because as much as I love The Circus, and I think it's starting to get its due now, it is considerably more anticsy than either Gold Rush or City Lights or Modern Times or anything that comes after, which has much more pathos. But I just thought that was interesting kind of to consider. Like, City Lights, he comes up with a blind plot for Circus, doesn't use it. And then with City Lights itself, he said he came up with the ending first and then built the entire film around it.
Yeah,
You-
I
you can
heard,
you
I
can
heard
feel
that
that.
too.
You can feel that, because not to like disparage the movie or say I didn't like the movie or anything, but this is a very like episodic movie, very very like, it's not like a straight line. Like, you can not have a single clue where this movie is going when it stops in its tracks for roughly 95 minutes to watch Chaplin get drunk with a suicidal rich man, and you're just like, what is this? I'm enjoying this, but I thought there was a blind girl that was going to be involved at some point, and it definitely has that feel of a movie where it was starting from Z and getting to A instead of the other way around.
I agree, but I also, the thing that makes this interesting and I think distinguishes it from the other films from the years prior, because obviously, the big thing, and we'll get into this more, the big thing about this film is it coming out 4 years after the innovation of the talkie, and many people, including, the people who've written about this film, have talked about, like, this is not just Jeffrey Vance, I know, said it. A number of people said it. This isn't just a film. This is an act of defiance. Like, it's Chaplin refusing to submit to, well, silence, you're dead now, talkies are everything. But beyond that, you look at the silent comedies, even the ones that we've covered already, right? Whether you look at, Harold Lloyd's The Freshman, or Buster Keaton's The General, or pretty much any of the other Lloyd or Keaton films. And for as much as I love them, they are very clearly like this structure of, we've got a basic overarching plot, and then gags. It's going to be the glasses guy goes to college, and then it's going to be a series of non sequitur gags at a college until the football game. What I think is interesting about this film is, while it still does that because that's what we expect of a comedy at this time, the one thing that Chaplin does is, as opposed to some of these earlier films and like Keaton's films or anything like that, where the gags are all kind of just whatever, Keaton famously would just get to a set and go, what gags can we do here? With this, I think everything is setting up something later, right? Like, you do kind of, when you watch it again, you notice, like, yes, in terms of, like, Tom, you're right, like, the film does stop in its tracks to have him hang out with a drunk millionaire, but I think 5, 6, 7 years earlier, if Chaplin's making this film is just about the little tramp's adventures in the big city. I think the fact that Tramp rescuing guy from killing himself at the water isn't just a one-off gag like it would have been 5, 6, 7 years earlier. It's now, well, this establishes their friendship and also tells you that the tramp believes in hope. And then him getting drunk with him but not recognizing him when he's sober is connected to the idea of this perpetual fear throughout this, which is, when this girl is able to see, will she recognize the tramp? Him setting up, like, well, he can get the money from the millionaire. even things like when you see him at his zoo job or his cleaning up after the, cleaning up on the streets, we're already showing the poster for the boxing in the background. Like, he's absolutely doing gag after gag, like the other structures of silent films. But as opposed to the films that come before it, I think it stops feeling cut and paste with City Lights. Like, I think it starts to have a bit more connective tissue.
I 100% agree. I think that's kind of why I haven't watched all of his movies, but of the ones I've seen, I think this is my favorite one because it does feel, even if it's starting from that end scene, it's at least got something where he can build everything towards something, and like it almost feels like, and it's not at that same level because it is more gag based than like screenplay based, but like it's that feeling you get when you watch like 80s Zemeckis movies where you go, oh fuck, every little bit of everything beforehand was leading to this ending, where it's all just the build up and the payoff and all of that stuff. It is just like, oh yeah, okay, so we do spend a lot of time with the rich guy, but that pays off with the thematic stuff you said, but just structurally screenwriting. Oh well, he doesn't know this guy doesn't remember him when he's sober. This is going to end up getting him sent to jail, where he's gone for 9 months, something like that.
Yeah,
and the girl has the surgery, and you having that moment of cutting back from her at the floral shop, him walking around being just absolutely dragged through hell and back by these little asshole kids. Which, I mean, hey, you live in New York like we do.
Exactly.
It's accurate. You yell at the hobos.
Well, no, Tom, you're right. You're right. There's, just, and I'm gonna get you so mad for a second at this, but like, you're right. Like, that's a classic staple of cinema. Across decades, street urchins harass the little tramp, and then decades later, street punks harass Arthur Fleck in his clown costume as he's spinning a sign in the equally triumphant Chaplin homage Joker. One of your favorite films, Tom.
We're gonna get some lame-o fucking dickhead Chaplin, riffs in Joker, Folle a douchebag.
Okay, so I'm taking us back. I'm bringing us back. But the Todd Phillips thing, I do think another element of this that is kind of interesting, watching City Lights, again for this podcast, watching City Lights is playing a fun game you can play the next time you watch it, which is how much of this movie was stolen by Todd Phillips in Joker, and how much of this movie was lifted by Woody Allen in Manhattan. Because Woody Allen has admitted his love of this movie, and not just that the ending of Manhattan is the ending of City Lights, but like even when the movie starts and we are looking at that wide shot of the cityscape, which is not an actual city, it was on the Chaplin lot, and it shows the title City Lights, and you hear that like siren sound at the beginning where it goes, and then goes into the City Lights score, which absolutely is why Manhattan starts with a black and white shot of the New York skyline and like that's beat for beat. He just takes the beginning and the end of City Lights.
I have not seen Manhattan in quite a long time, so I did not pick up on any of that watching this movie. Wouldn't surprise me that Woody Allen would take from this movie, which in lesser hands could come off like maybe a sex criminal was at the center of this movie.
I mean,
kind of weird to just always just like creeping around the blind girl and being like, ooh, she's pretty.
Hey, listen, if you ask J. Edgar Hoover, a sex criminal was at the center of this film.
I didn't know J. Edgar Hoover was in the movie.
Because this is also, I mean, obviously, I think it's somewhere around.
He's dead,
time.
Kyle. You can keep it in.
Yeah, fuck Kyle.
I'm laughing. I'm laughing at that one. Fuck you. I'm laughing at that.
This is. I want to be clear, and I'm putting this on the record. This is firmly a J. Edgar Hoover is a bad man podcast.
Yeah. What are you talking about? Yeah, there's no apologists for J. Edgar on this show. Get out of here.
There's not even apologists for the movie J. Edgar on this podcast.
Oh,
anyway.
Absolutely not. Nope. Sorry.
No. Worst. That's not even Clint's worst movie. I couldn't even say it. No, it's that train movie with the veterans.
15, 30
Oh, the
to
Paris. Paris?
1517
15,
to Paris?
13 to Yuma. I don't know. It's a bad movie.
Is that where he cast actual like soldiers?
Yeah.
It's the actual
Yeah.
guys
that
who
went-
did who were. It was the actual guys that stopped the terrorist attack, and you
Yeah.
can tell that they were budding, fledgling thespians based on how when you watch the movie, you yourself become blind.
It's interesting because, to bring it back to Chaplin in that way, I was listening to people talk about Chaplin and the way that he directed people. And he was very much, especially because he comes from silent film, where, let's be honest, in terms of silent film acting, we weren't really talking about method or anything like that, right? We weren't really, Stanislavski didn't factor in for a lot of people in the silent era. Chaplin's way of directing people was to just literally act out the scene. He would just play all the characters in front of the actors and be like, do that. And he carried that through to his sound films. He was doing that all the way up to his last film he directed, Countess from Hong Kong, which starred Sophia Loren and Marlon Brando. And reportedly, Marlon Brando was fucking furious that a director had the audacity to act out a scene and then look at Marlon and go, do that. Brando did not like working with Chaplin at all. That movie is not very good, but it is weird. But Chaplin would act this stuff out, and that's why there are performers in this film who just hadn't acted before, would never act again, because he could just do that. He could just pick people he thought was interesting and go, "Hey, come in and do this." I forget who it was talking about Countess in Hong Kong and saying it was kind of an incredible thing to see, because there's Chaplin playing all these characters and giving different body language and different voices to all of them. But Chaplin, and another thing that Brando didn't like about Chaplin was reportedly a tyrant and a dick. That's certainly true of this film. Virginia Sherrill got yelled at by Chaplin for everything, including, and this is real, he yelled at her for her line delivery.
Really? For her line? Oh.
Her line delivery. In a movie that he knew full goddamn well was silent.
Okay, so it kind of has to be. So this now begs the question: he wanted to fuck her and she didn't fuck him. Like that's 100% the reason. Like,
absolutely, abso-fucking-lutely. That's also the same reason I'm convinced he makes Countess in Hong Kong after he is tired of making movies, just because he wants to put Sophia Loren in it. Like, there's no doubt in my mind.
I mean, because that is just a psychotic reason to yell at someone. Hey, you're not delivering your lines right. Hey, Chuck, gotta tell you something, buddy. No one will ever know. I could be saying Charlie Chaplin sucks cock the entire time, and no one would know except you, God, and the guy on the other side of the wall.
I mean, I will say,
yeah.
You can read lips in silent films. You can see what people are saying.
I always try to. I was trying to read the lips of when they're acting in silent films, and I feel like they're not even speaking in English. I feel like as a kid, I thought they were like speaking in like some foreign language. I always thought so. I was like, I wish what are they actually saying here, like in this scene? But then, I don't know. Yeah, it's crazy that he yelled at her for that.
There's actually, this is one of the few films that there's behind the scenes footage of this film.
Really?
If it's on the Criterion disc, if anybody has that, I think they just put it out on Blu-ray again. I don't know.
What is that the movie you're giving to me, or what's the one you're giving to me?
No, I'm giving you Buster Keaton as the cameraman that I bought.
Oh, that's the one. Listen, I've been there.
But City Lights, a friend of his came to the set and shot 16mm footage, and there's footage of them shooting the scene where he first encounters the flower girl, Virginia Carroll's character. Interesting thing, the footage that this friend of his shot didn't end up in the movie because they took like 2 years to make this film. They started shooting with that scene, and Chaplin was dissatisfied with it for 1,000,001 reasons. But the main reason, and this is the one thing, if you read anything about City Lights, this is like the one thing you absolutely come across, which is they were upset. He was upset and frustrated because he couldn't figure out a way for the blind girl to mistake him for a rich person. That's the whole thing. And in all of this behind-the-scenes footage, there is no reason for her to mistake him, right? He can't figure it out. Charlie cannot crack it. And then eventually, he figures out the conceit of she should hear the door of the car slam. Even though we don't hear it in the soundtrack, she should hear it, and that should be why she mistakes him for a wealthy person. And that's apparently a thing he just happened to think of one day. Or if you watch the Robert Downey Jr. biopic, he has a real Dewey Cox thinks of his whole life moment, and then hears a car door slam and goes, "Oh no!" In the movie, the movie's not super accurate. In the Downey biopic, Sidney Chaplin is trying to convince Charlie, "You have to make a sound picture. Silent pictures are dead." And he brings a sound technician over, and Charlie tosses him out. And as they're leaving, he's fretting about, how do I convey that he's rich? How do I? And he, as the sound guy is getting into his car and slams the door shut angrily, Charlie goes, "That's it! Everyone back! Bring back the sound man! I have an idea!"
What was that voice?
That, Tom,
I was
Tom,
going to ask, too.
that is, I'm not joking. Look, and I love the performance. That is pretty close to what Downey is doing at points that we... Even in 92, when he was up for the Oscar, people were going, that accent is fucking weird at points. Like, it was... There are points in this movie, in the Chaplin biopic, where it feels akin to when you're watching Forrest Whitaker and Black Panther, and there's just, like, certain line deliveries where you go, what voice do you think this is?
No, the voice where Whitaker does that is Rogue One, where you're just
Yes,
like,
that's true.
what even is this? Are you okay? Do you smell toast right now? What the fuck is going on? Also, was the friend that was recording these special features, was it Chan Wang?
No, because this was a friend of his who killed himself like right after the movie came out.
Okay, so it wasn't a Chinese cop who got into some adventures in Britain with him and
I completely. So here's the thing. For a minute, Tom, I thought you were doing it because they in the behind the scenes featurettes they talked about these two. That there was I couldn't remember his name, but that Charlie Chaplin was enamored by a Chinese sword stunt troupe and invited them to set. And I was like, as you were describing that, I'm like, oh, I guess he remembers the name of the sword troupe. No, you were doing a...
No, I was making a Shanghai Nights joke.
Shanghai Nights joke. A movie I've never seen because
Good
I
movie.
remember... Really, because one day I said to you, I remember this vividly, I went, I've never seen the Rush Hours and I've never seen the Shanghai Noon, Shanghai Nights franchise.
Oh, you're missing out. You're missing out.
But I just remember saying at the time, going, which one of these should I... Which one should I watch first? And Tom just went, you really don't need to. I was like, okay.
Listen, you don't need to, because this is a thing I deal with all the time with this show, which is I really can't put any Jackie Chan movies up as like a pick for the registry. Otherwise, I have to like, I mean, am I really going to make the labored argument for Rush Hour or Shanghai? Like, listen, I honestly think the Shanghai movies are the better Jackie Chan American movies. They're fun, like little, alt history, like kids movies, and they're fun, they're charming. Jackie's got good stunts in it, probably better than the Rush Hour movies, to be honest. I mean, you're not missing anything. There's like 20 Jackie Chan movies you can watch before you get to his American stuff. It's just, yeah.
I mean, Police Story, I would put that in National Registry, personally speaking. But
it's not an American movie.
Oh, that is true. That's the American. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Never mind.
And that's it. He made like 2 or 3 American movies in the 80s, and one of them's good in that, like, get drunk with your friends and like watch a silly 80s action movie way. But it's not like, even I would be hard pressed to make a solid argument for Jackie Chan in The Protector to be in the National Film Registry. I probably will at some point, because there will be one day where I just straight up forget to pick a movie before we record, and I go, fuck.
Tom?
Jackie Chan's The Protector.
Excuse me. There will be one day? Pull back the curtain. That has already happened once on this show.
Well, there will be one day, as in, like, it's happened before, and it will happen again. Yes, this is a thing that will happen again.
Ardent listeners, write in. Let us know. which Registry pick do you think was the one that Tom forgot he had to do until the day of? Let us know what you think.
Oh,
Yeah.
the easiest one. Here come the co-eds.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I was mad that day. Anyway, back to City Lights, which we've
City
got.
Lights.
We're talking about City Lights. I forgot.
Yes,
City
where
Lights.
the only rush hour in City Lights is a protracted drunk driving scene.
It's a good joke. I'm driving? Good joke.
That's kind of the thing with it, is that, Tom, you mentioned like how the movie is kind of episodic. I think one of the most impressive things about City Lights, honestly, especially when you watch enough Lloyd and Keaton and other Chaplin films, is yes, it's episodic. It's, gag bit, gag bit, gag bit. The thing that impresses, that's really impressive about City Lights is there's not one segment in this movie that doesn't land. Right? There's not one comedic segment where you kind of go, all right, let's just, okay, I don't know if this isn't really playing. And that happens with so many of these films. Where there'll be like at least one moment where you're like, okay, I guess this was funny at the time. I guess this landed. I rewatched Buster Keaton's College recently, and that is a movie that like will have one segment where you're like, this is so funny, and the next segment you go, oh, this is real dull. And then vice versa and back and forth, and then Buster Keaton's in blackface for a scene, and you go, "Oh no!"
I have to agree with Mike on that one actually, because I want to rewatch City Lights before I obviously came on the podcast. But before I actually dreaded, I was like, I can watch a silent film, and it's black and white. But then I turned on City Lights, and I was like, this is actually. I at least giggled like in each like gag that he did in the film. I mean, with the exception of maybe the noodle scene where he's slurping the spaghetti and he slurps into the balloon, I think, or something like that. That might have been a little too much for me. But anyways, the other gags really did actually hit. You're right, and the choreography in there is just, I don't know. It still can pass today as something that's at least you can chuckle at it, I think.
That's just the beauty of what he does, and it's the reason why him and Keaton they've lasted, is that it's like the physical humor is so simple and just can transcend time, and it's not dating itself. Like the humor isn't like, whoa, hey, like did you hear what President Truman had to say or some shit, and he's just like, no, like I don't care about Truman. I know at the time it would be FDR. I get it, guys, leave me alone.
In 31, isn't it Hoover at that point?
Is it? Or no, because FDR wins his fourth election and dies, which is what, 44? 45? No, it would have to be like an odd, even numbered year.
There is somebody screaming at their radio.
Well, all right. Well, Mike's looking it up. But either way, I know the humor in this is not like based in a specific time. Even the fact that like he's poor and she's poor and all of this, like the only thing that really dates it is that the back rent is $22, which is just like, oh, I would take so much dick if I had to fucking pay only $22 for back rent. Not even rent I owe, rent that has accrued enough where I'm getting evicted. I would kill everyone on this podcast. I don't care.
Tom, you would do that. Tom, you would do that for 1/3 of this podcast for like a bagel and some change, really. You just need someone to give you the opportunity, and you're taking me out pretty fast. It wouldn't take. You would do it for $22 now, just today's money. So, 2 quick corrections I want to throw in. Number 1, Hoover was president from 1929 to March of 1933. So this falls early in the Hoover
so this is Hoover.
administration.
Okay.
Other thing I wanted to note, just because I had it in my notes and I wanted to make sure I got it noted, I misspoke earlier. Virginia Cheryl didn't want. It wasn't that she showed up to set late. It was that she asked Chaplin to leave set early one day to make a hair appointment, and he got pissed off and fired her. So, but as for the humor and talking about what still works, I would say not only does it still work, there are jokes in this movie that they're subtle, but there are jokes in this movie that I do kind of feel shocked made it in 31. I think only Chaplin could have done. I'm thinking specifically of like the street sweep scene where his job is, clean up the streets, and he's walking up the street and he's about to make a right, and then a horse passes him by. So he turns around because he doesn't want to clean up horse shit. And then an elephant walks by and he speeds away, which is like, there's a poop joke in this movie. You don't expect that. There's a joke about how big elephant shit.
2 poop jokes for the price of 1. I'm all for that, man.
And then later, the gay joke in the locker room when Chaplin is trying to when he's trying to be friendly to the boxer, because obviously there's the first boxer who he's supposed to fight. He gets run out of town. The other guy comes in, and Chaplin, the little tramp, doesn't know what to do. So he tries to be sweet to him, and the boxer is trying to change his pants. Chaplin starts making eyes at him and batting his eyelashes, and the boxer goes behind a curtain to change.
Yeah, I was actually surprised that past 31, just how flamboyant Chaplin can act on film like that, especially during that time. That's a brave move. But you could also see like a lot of influences that this movie has passed on physically. Like even like you watch like wrestling today, like WWE, like you could tell that they even borrowed from like that boxing scene that Chaplin was in, with the gags with the referee and like, all that stuff. You could definitely see like that physical comedy being translated into like, sports entertainment.
This is every Orange Cassidy match in AEW, right? Like this is
100%. Wrestlers definitely. We mentioned him before, but I mean Jackie Chan. He prayed at the altar of Charlie Chaplin. He really, the way he was able to mix him and Bruce Lee and make his own unique stew, which changed action cinema forever, is astounding. I know they use Keaton a lot more than Chaplin, but there's no way that Chaplin wasn't on the mind of the guys who make the John Wick movies, because they have they have Buster Keaton clips in those movies, but you can't like be that deep into film history and not also be like, we're gonna have some Charlie Chaplin bits too.
I mean, who else draws a lot from Chaplin? And we're talking about the batting in the eyes and making the sweet face. That's Bugs Bunny. Right? That's
yeah.
I mean, Chaplin is so. I think and Tom, you and I were texting about this, just on our own talking about this, and the fluctuations of like who is the dominant figure, Chaplin or Keaton, and how for a while it was like the cool hip answer to say Charlie Chaplin, sure, but the real genius was Buster Keaton. And now that opinion is so saturated that it's almost like Chaplin is underrated in some senses. But when you look at like whether it's Mickey Mouse or the Looney Tunes, like there are so many of the little tramp popping up, because just the one thing that Chaplin really does so well, and especially in this film, is and it's Gold Rush too. He understands how powerful little moments can be for comedy, right? Keaton, who I love, but Keaton, has his big stunts. He does his big stunts. Chaplin also understands that he can do as much with just batting his eyes or poking his finger, right? And he can still make a good bit out of it. He got his start playing drunk for Max Sennett, who, by the way, I hate to bring it up again, in the Downey Jr. biopic is played by Dan Aykroyd. And his cameraman is played by David Duchovny.
Really?
Sure.
David Duchovny was in the film? Oh,
not only is David... Oh, wait, I'll give you one better. So the first girl that Chaplin marries, the 16-year-old who he thought he got pregnant, and then it turns out she wasn't pregnant, in the 1992 Chaplin biopic is played by Resident Evil star Mila Jovovich.
No way.
It is...
Wow.
Anytime Mila Jovovich pops up in a 90s movie and you're like, right, your career was in a real different place back then. You were doing real different stuff.
That's crazy.
Yeah, then she got married to a wife guy, and the rest is history.
But yeah, Chaplin obviously, like all of that influence, and I think City Lights has a lot to do with that, because it does kind of show like what he does with the tramp, and it starts with the immigrant and the kid, but what he does with the tramp is he kind of shows like you can have a character that we can laugh at and still feel for.
Well, I think that's kind of and we didn't get into this in our off mic discussions, but because I just thought of it now. We said that we think earnestness is a problem today, and that's why Keaton is kind of like the easier answer for a lot of people today, because you don't have to deal with saccharine sweetness. I think that also plays into why I may be kind of starting to slide towards the Chaplin side of the argument, is that Chaplin as a performer is much more dynamic than Keaton. He's able to do more than just be a mopey fuck like Buster Keaton. Buster Keaton is just Eeyore, and listen, that's great, but he's only doing that mopey look and just kind of doing stunts. That's kind of his thing. Where Chaplin, like, he's going through ups and downs and having different reactions to things, like the, batting the eyes. I mean, like, it's not even the last scene, but when he gives her the money at the end, and he's just like, you could just read it on his face. He's like, yep, this fucking sucks. I am going to jail for some time, and I'm not going to be able to see you. I just hope you're okay. And you're like, yeah, that's a good performance. That is something you're not getting in the General, mainly because this movie doesn't have room for pro-Confederate ideations. But
I think it's interesting if you go back and watch the early Chaplin shorts that he makes for Keystone and SNA, right? The earliest version of Little Tramp is a dick. He's drunk all the time. He's fucking with people. There's one where he's just like, he's married. The tramp is married to Mabel Normand, who was a great silent actress of her time. And like, he's just like a shitty husband. Like, the tramp is unpleasant. And Chaplin kind of figures out two things. Because all of our great silent stars, if you pick the three geniuses, right? You have Buster Keaton, pork pie hat and stone face, Harold Lloyd, Coke bottle glasses and a big old smile, and then the little tramp with his, his get up. I think that all of them relied on this kind of stock character for laughs and like what they would do. But I think what Chaplin figures out and kind of builds on is Chaplin realizes it's better if the tramp isn't the central. I mean, he's still the central character in terms of the most screen time and everything like that. But it's better if he's not necessarily the entirety of the action, if he's affecting other lives, right? Like A Dog's Life, which is somehow not in the Registry, but I rewatched recently. A Dog's Life is incredible because it realizes, like, oh, if you pair the tramp with a dog, it's somehow you're more invested because now it's not about the tramp trying to do something for himself. He's trying to do something for this dog. And the kid obviously is the crystallization of that, right? You love the tramp because you pair him with this kid. City Lights, he's got, the blind woman he's trying to take care of. He's got his suicidal millionaire friend. Like, there's a lot more pathos because the tramp is now just kind of like, I don't know, this Then Came Bronson, littlest hobo kind of figure that just sort of drifts in and out and like solves people's problems and then goes away.
Yeah, I think he figuring that out gave him a much more dynamic character to play, a much more, not relatable because he is kind of like this unkillable just agent of chaos in a way, but like, you like him more. You root for him, and you feel bad at the end when everyone's just taking a dump on him when he's out of prison and he looks even worse than before. Also, maybe just a little note on my end. Maybe don't make the blind girl, when she is able to see, as much as a bitch as she is at the end of this movie, because she gets her sight, and boy howdy is she really willing to jump on the let's make fun of the hobo train.
But you know what? I think that I love that for the fact that she has in her mind that she was saved by a rich man. And I think what Chaplin's saying, because he's a very class-conscious guy, right? He's so class-conscious, he gets kicked out of the country by J. Edgar Hoover. Anyway, he's so class-conscious that there is this idea that he's setting up that, like, at first the tramp and the blind girl are able to bond because they're both kind of shunned by society. And once her problem is fixed, she kind of becomes like the swimming pool socialists in Hollywood, right? She kind of becomes the person that's like, well, now I got money. I don't need to worry, which is also what Chaplin could have been. I mean, remember, he's an orphan. He grows up poor. He makes a ton of money. He could have very easily been one of these guys that just turned his back on everybody. And I think that her being such an asshole when this poor, broke guy shows up also sort of adds the suspense of like, oh, she's going to reject him when she realizes she's never even going to consider that he's his. And when she touches his hand and has that moment of like, it's you, you get to see her entire worldview shift a bit because she never even considered that it could be anything but a wealthy benefactor. And again, that ending is just,
I get that. I think there's a way to make that point without her being a rampant asshole, and you could kind of just make it like, he's poor, so she's kind of just really not giving him much attention or whatever, and she's kind of trying to like stay away from him instead of just being like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna laugh at this hobo and just be a real. It's just like the one, because then I'm thinking about it from like his point of view, where it's just like, oh well, fuck her.
I mean,
I
look,
love how Tom calls
she's
her
a bully.
rampant asshole.
this is Jay.
She is.
Jay, you've listened to the show enough. You've listened to the show enough to know that it is a recurring segment on You're Missing Out, which is anytime Tom is discussing a classic film, he always has a Columbo moment, which is in every episode there'll be.
I love it.
Great movie, incredible movie, unimpeachable. Just one thing. And again, I'm not saying that's bad, and I'm not invalidating your criticism. I am just saying that has been a recurring segment of the show where you'll be like, look, it's great. One thing. If I could change one thing. I got one note for this guy who's been dead for 50 years.
Well, listen, I'll dig him up and give him the business.
Tom, somebody already dug up Chaplin's body. It was kind of a famous thing. They held it for ransom. If anyone has been dug up, it's Charlie. They fixed that now. You can't.
Wow, J. Edgar really got fucking busy, didn't he? He really took it to the grave, literally.
Wait, for real? You guys knew about that, right? That people dug up Chaplin's corpse and held it for ransom?
Wait, what?
Yeah,
what?
Look it up, guys. It's 100% real. Somebody dug up Chaplin's corpse and held it for ransom.
I'm so glad I came on this show.
How is that not a Coen Brothers movie?
Right?
Oh, well, because they don't make movies anymore.
Yeah.
Together,
That's true.
Chaplin, I mean, you want to talk about just a
Bill Hader should make that as a movie. Oh, yeah. Bill Hader, after you make your horror movie, make the movie about the dipshits that tried to steal and ransom Charlie Chaplin's corpse. I mean, that's pretty metal. I love that. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Let me see if I can find. I've got it. I've got you guys. In March of 1978, people dug up Chaplin's body in Geneva, Switzerland. Lake Geneva in Switzerland, March 2nd, 1978, and held the coffin and body for ransom for $600,000.
That's pretty reasonable price.
Took a 5-week investigation, and eventually the police arrested 2 auto mechanics, Roman Wardas of Poland and Goncho Ganev of Bulgaria, who on May 17th led them to Chaplin's body, which they had buried in a cornfield about a mile from Chaplin's family home in Corsair. So, yeah, and they were convicted of grave robbing, and they were political refugees from Eastern Europe who stole Chaplin's body in an attempt to solve their financial difficulties. I think that, honestly, I think the more interesting thing is that if you could somehow speak to Charlie Chaplin and go, so 2 Eastern European political refugees are so desperate for money to solve their financial problem that they dig up the corpse of a beloved film star and try and hold it for ransom. Chaplin's response would be, yes, that is a great pitch. That's my next film.
2 Eastern Europeans do something criminal? Thanks, Biden.
Kyle's already made the notes, Tom. He didn't even blink at that one. You got to space him out or he just stops feeling after a certain point. You do too many one episode, Kyle gets like people in Hellraiser where he's just like, fine, I'll open the box. I can't feel any other sensations anymore. Regular pain doesn't apply anymore. But I do think, with Chaplin throughout the film, I think that this is, look, I've always considered this his masterpiece, my favorite of his films. Tom, you said this is probably your favorite. Jay, out of curiosity, where, because you mentioned loving the kid, and so where does this fall for you in the Chaplin films?
I think for me, just if I'm trying to see this from an objective standpoint, I do think this is Chaplin's best work, I think, ever. I mean, the kid has a more personal connection to me, but City Lights, I rewatched that again today, and the fact that I can still enjoy it, there's that's a testament to his filmmaking, I think, for this film. So I would have to say objectively, I think it is his best, his masterpiece as well. I mean, from all the gags that connect with each other all the way to that final scene, it just gets me. I almost lost at that final scene, actually. I don't know. He always manages to get me emotionally, and also, and then I'm in it for the ride, for the gags as well. He makes me laugh, he makes me chuckle. I mean, yeah. So objectively, I think this is a great piece of filmmaking.
And I mean, I think the thing that's great about City Lights 2 is that it's great when you watch it on its own, right? This can play to a 5-year-old, this can play to anybody. But when you understand the context, right? And you put this in its place as Chaplin making a silent comedy at a time where every other silent film was dead in the water, right?
Mm.
That talkies had dominated. This is the singing in the rain moment, the artist moment, the Damien Chazelle's Babylon moment. This
The
is
what?
all Damien Chazelle's Babylon, Tom.
His what? Damien Chazelle's what?
Oh! It was this movie that came out last year that was 3 hours long and bad, but a bunch of people on Twitter think is good because it made them feel something. Again, a
I have not watched it.
Hellraiser.
I have not watched it yet.
I feel like I would have heard about this. I think you're fucking with me.
Tom, I know you've heard about it because we can find our text chats of me texting you as I watched it and then you texting me as you watched it, and
God,
both of
what a
us
piece
going,
of shit
what's
that movie
happening?
is.
Who did this?
What a piece of shit. What did I do to Damien Chazelle to deserve that? I've never even met the man. I've liked his previous 3 movies. I didn't deserve Babylon to be inflicted upon me.
That bad, huh? I don't
It's
watch it yet.
Terrible.
That bad,
Terrible.
huh?
Maybe you will dig it, but I think like my thing is we all have movies that we can look at and go, objectively this is a mess, but it's just like playing right to me. Like the Downey Chaplin biopic for me is a movie that like any criticisms I read about it, I go, you are 100% right. Everything you're saying is 100% right. But also this movie is playing to me. Like it's just right what I want. It's exactly what I want to see. But in any event, Chaplin's making this film in the silent era is over. It's 1931. This is nobody thinks this is going to work. And quite frankly, had it failed, Chaplin would have been in the ash heap of history with Charlie Chase and Charles Bowers and Fatty Arbuckle and Mabel Normand and all of these other names and Harold Lloyd and all of that. But understanding that this movie isn't just coming out at that time, he's actively responding to it. Right? Like the first scene you see in the movie is them dedicating the statue, and all of the voices are just Chaplin talking into a kazoo.
Wah, wah,
Right?
wah, wah, wah,
Like
wah,
that's
wah.
yeah.
Oh.
It's
Very
him
Peanuts.
absolutely ridiculing that. Another weird thing that I thought was fascinating about that scene. They unveil the statue, they're all yelling at the tramp, and then the Star Spangled Banner starts to play. Right?
Yeah.
And they all salute. According to the commentary I was listening to, and I could, if this is wrong, yell at Jeffrey Vance, not me. But when the film premiered, Star Spangled Banner was not our national anthem. That would officially happen in March of 1931, 2 months after the film premieres. So it's already getting that in a little early.
That's the power of Chaplin, baby.
Yeah. There's so much in this,
Wow.
It's funny because it comes out in 1931, like you said. Silent or Dead. It's the talkie era, and you look, and we're going to talk about one of these movies later this season. But 2 of the biggest, most influential movies in 1931 come. This. It's funny to think the same year as this, you get Dracula and Frankenstein.
Yeah.
In the same year, which just changes the world. Basically, horror is now a thing, and talkie horror and this visual language is birthed, and it's crazy to think that a silent Charlie Chaplin movie came out at the same time.
It's also worth noting those films are kind of the exception to the rule at the time. I mean, we obviously covered All Quiet on the Western Front last season, which is a remarkable sound film, but like so many of those early sound films, when you watch them, including shit like Cimarron and East Lynne, they are so slow and visually dull and miserable. And I think that's the thing that Chaplin's kind of afraid of losing when he's making this film, is he's afraid of, he had spent so much time inventing and perfecting silent film language to have to not have that anymore in favor of like everybody stand in place for the microphones, I think bothers him immensely.
Which is crazy because Dracula and Frankenstein just use silent film visuals, but also sound. Like, that's why it's so, like, you watch Dracula more than Frankenstein, but, like, you watch Dracula and you could just turn the audio off and be fine.
Now, I have a couple little Easter eggs I want to throw out. I'm going to throw out one little one, and then there's one where I need to queue up something from Jay for that. One thing I'll say is that the statue that Chaplin is admiring in the window scene, right? The bit where he's walking by and there's like a horse statue and then a statue of a naked woman. And he's pretending to look at the horse statue so he can look at the naked woman. That statue is reused from his previous dramatic film, A Woman in Paris. So it's a little Easter egg there. The other one, Jay, I need to now relay a little bit. I need to, to convey this anecdote. I need you to talk about something you talked about before we got on mic. Last time you were here, Jay, you were talking about how you had a line in the then forthcoming motion picture Fast 9. So would you mind, for the listeners' edification, talking a little bit about what you were talking to us on mic, giving them a refresher of what that was supposed to be and how it worked out?
So I was supposed to be the leading star of Fast 9, but they cast me as an extra instead, actually. For political reasons. Anyways, no, I was cast as an extra in
Thanks, Biden.
Fast 9. Thank you. I don't want to give Kyle more work to edit out stuff. Anyways, I was cast as an extra, and incredible experience. Huge franchise. And I got lucky. I was cast as an extra as one of the 90s kids when the flashback happened, and I was accidentally right in front of the camera, actually, and the director comes up to me out of nowhere. He taps me on the shoulder and he's like, "Hey, do you want a line?" And I'm like, "Fuck yes, I want a line." And he said, "Can you say this line? Can you say, place your bets? But can you say it in a more like, can you say like a street style if you can?" And I was like, "I will do whatever you want me to do right now." And I shot that scene. I kid you not. For 6 hours straight, I said that line for 6 hours on camera. When the camera wasn't even on me, I would say that line. I lost my voice at the end of the night.
Jay, was Charlie Chaplin your director? Because that sounds like what he was doing. Was that who was shooting Fast 9?
Yeah. It was the ghost of Charlie Chaplin that was shooting Fast 9. But I lost my voice. It was like 6. We're shooting from like 1 a.m. to like 7 in the morning. I was saying the same line, and I was like, "Holy shit! I don't give a shit if I lost my voice. I don't care how tired I am. I'm gonna see myself saying something in the fucking Fast 9 franchise and in the Fast and Furious franchise." And I was so excited, and guess what? They cut that scene out. I literally, you cannot blink when you watch Fast 9 because I do have the craziest haircut in that film. They made me look like a 90s like gangster hipster. I don't know what they pretty much gelled my hair up. They're like I look like a pineapple head. But you can't blink. In the flashback scene, I'm wearing yellow and black, and I'm wearing a huge gold chain that I usually do in real life, and baggy street pants, and and so you can't miss me for sure. But you don't blink though. I was waiting for my line to come up, and guess what? They cut it out. And that's why Fast 10 failed, because I didn't say, "Yo, place your bets."
Well, I will say, Jay, don't feel bad. It happens to the best of us. And the reason I say that is because there is someone who was cut out of City Lights, the dance club scene, a.k.a. Tom's favorite scene in the movie, where Charlie and the millionaire get up to drunken antics in a dance club. There was a woman who was in the film. There was a woman in the film who, if you look at behind-the-scenes set photos, you can see her. But every piece of footage with her in it is cut out. You can only see her in set photos. This was before she was anybody. this could have been her big break, maybe. But she was cut out of the film entirely. Her name was Jean Harlow. And by the time City Lights actually came out, despite her being cut from that film, working as an extra, she had her big break in Howard Hughes' Hell's Angels. So by the time City Lights comes out, had she been in the film, there probably would have been a lot of people going, "Is that fucking Jean Harlow in the background? What is she doing here?" But yeah, so I say that, and that's the reason when you were telling us off mic, I'm like, wait till we're on mic, because take solace in the fact Jean Harlow was cut out of City Lights. So,
wow,
your Hell's Angels might be right around the corner. Maybe there's a crazy aviator who's ready to give you your big break. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm waiting. I'm still waiting, but it's bound to happen.
I don't know. Our crazy millionaire, our crazy rich people don't make movies anymore. It's kind of sad. I wish.
That is true.
No, they just try to make slavery legal again.
Yeah. Less fun. Way less fun. One thing I did want to touch on a bit, though, and I mean, obviously we're bouncing around, but a thing that struck me in that dance hall scene, there's a lot to say about the dance hall scene. The entire character of the millionaire, I mean, look, I love a good suicide joke, and this is full of them. Him throwing the noose around he's throwing the rock with the noose, but it's around the tramp's neck is great. Him accidentally firing the gun is great, and pouring the booze in his pants. All of that is great. But it did strike me during the dance hall scene, the frenetic score when all the music is playing. Obviously, Chaplin co-composed this score. He gets credit for composing the score. There was actually a lawsuit because the melody for the theme for The Flower Girl is somebody else's composition, which is why now when you watch the film, it credits one particular song. Anyway, Chaplin gets credit for composing the film. He actually just hummed melodies that he had to other people and made them transcribe them. But whatever, we're going to say Chaplin composed it for now for a sake. Did anybody else feel like watching the dance club scene and hearing that score, you're like, oh, this is where Nino Rota takes like half of his music cues for Fellini's films, right? Like that to me sounds like, oh, this is the song that plays throughout 8.5 whenever Guido is spiraling, right?
I could see that.
Yeah.
Like any of that, I just kept hearing like that ba 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 ba, as all the people are dancing around. I'm like, oh, they're all dancing in the circle around the rocket ship. Waving goodbye to Marcello Mastroianni, which I loved. But
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Yeah, them Italians, they love lifting things.
What? Yeah,
he's dead. Fuck him.
Also, a couple things like that I do kind of love in this that are worth noting. There are so many little things, little gags and bits that happen in this that are kind of recycled from earlier films, but done better. Like the bit with the millionaire getting blackjacked over the head by the robbers. That's in A Dog's Life when the robbers take the wallet from the tramp. The flowers, the star flower crown, whatever you want to call it, around the bald guy's head at the party, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Remember that? Yeah, I remember that.
That comes from an earlier Chaplin film as well. Now I'm forgetting which title that was, but like he's taking his, he's lifting things from earlier films and kind of going, well, now I'm at a place where I can perfect the bit, right? Now I'm at a place where I can take this thing and I had half an idea and now I can make it even better. And that's what's really fun with City Lights is watching him kind of play with it. Even his use of sound. He rarely uses sound in the movie other than for the music. He could have had us hear the car door, but he decided we didn't need to. But he does make sure we hear the whistle sound when the tramp swallows the whistle.
Yeah.
Because, well, it's funny if we hear it, right?
I remember that. Yeah. I lost it at that too, actually. That still holds up today for some reason. I don't know why, but it's just Chaplin being Chaplin.
I will say one last thing, and then I think we'll all just kind of spit out whatever we're thinking and talking about bits that we liked. But one thing that is impressive with this one, especially, I mentioned that I watched College with Buster Keaton again recently, and there's a blackface sequence in that. And there's a lot of racist humor in some Keaton films and some Lloyd films. And Jay, as you can probably imagine on this show, we've covered a lot of films that have some dicey racial content, right? Can
love
I
it. Yeah.
can I express the joy that I felt when a black man appears in this movie and absolutely nothing racist happens at any point, and he is just treated like a human being? What a breath of fresh air
I
compared to so many
I
other
was
silent
holding
films.
my breath when I was like, I forgot there was a black person in this film.
Yeah.
And I watched it and I was like, I hope he doesn't do anything racist. I hope he doesn't do anything racist. I hope he doesn't do anything racist. And he doesn't do anything racist. I was like,
I mean, not only does he not do anything racist, he holds objects that the guy had just held, which I'm sure made people running theaters in the in the deep south go, I don't know if we can show this scene. That actor, by the way, his name is Victor Alexander. He shows up 3 years later in Cleopatra. He didn't do a lot of films, but that's the one other notable title in his filmography.
oh, okay.
But it's a great
That's pretty
bit, and
cool.
I think it's one of my favorite little gags in the movie is when he's doing all of the the rabbit's foot and all of that. He's doing all the good luck charms, goes out to fight. The
Yeah.
tramp starts doing the good luck, and immediately the guy comes back having the shit kicked out of him. And Tramp just looks at the good luck charms like, well, these are broken. And then the guy that beat
Yeah.
up Victor Alexander gets knocked out in one punch by the guy that Tramp's about to face. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. Brilliant sequence. Brilliant.
All right, now I have said I've had so many things where I've been like, just one thing. I have said so much about this movie. I apologize. I want to open up the floor to either Tom or Jay. I think just start spitting out some of your favorite gags, some of your favorite bits, because I feel like we haven't even touched on some.
I mean, go for it, Tom.
I mean, Mike said it. Just two guys just getting drunk and just getting into some shenanigans at the big little at the restaurant. Love that. And yeah, I gotta say, I really love the opening with them just pulling the sheet off the statue, and he's just sleeping in its lap, and he's trying to get off, but he can't. The sword goes up his pants, and he's just hanging there. And yeah, the Star Spangled Banner plays, and they stop, and it's just. I mean, that's
he shoves his ass in a statue's face too.
Yeah,
which is so good.
I mean, that's a hell of a way. Like I knew we were in good hands with this one when it starts with that. I'm like, okay, this is. I can't be like a persnickety bitch about this movie when it starts off this well. This is one of the good ones. This is a good flick.
Jay?
Yeah, I agree. I want to first off start by saying that I'm just so appreciative of Chaplin just willing to make himself look like an idiot, willing to put himself out there as, physically as somebody who's not that strong. He's not the typical man's man in the film. And, this is obviously an ongoing gag in a lot of other films as a tramp, but I think it attests to that, to the fact that, he's putting himself out there, and he's sacrificing his image in a sense. I feel so effortlessly. If that makes any sense. But if I were to pick my favorite gags, yeah, that entire boxing sequence of him being just just flamboyant with the other boxer is definitely one of my favorites. But also, there was actually a scene that made me pretty tense, which is when he was looking. I think he was looking at on one of the store's glass. He was looking at something in the store, and then he was backing up.
Yeah,
and then the
statue.
floor was. The floor was like going up and down. Yeah, exactly. And you thought he was going to fall in, and then he's not. He doesn't fall in, and he doesn't. And it's just his movement. His movement is so effortless, but yet it's not overboard. Like there's subtlety to his actions, like which is amazing. Like he doesn't show. You could tell that he's very athletic, but he doesn't need to show too much to get you in. So I really appreciate that about Chaplin. I mean, it's gags, but there's subtlety to it too. And of course, my favorite. I mean, as an actor, you forget that Charlie, I feel like sometimes, is actually a brilliant actor, and he conveys so much with so little. And that ending sequence, if we could finally talk about that is just that is just one of the greatest performances I think put on film in general. I mean, how do you just that look of his of like, I don't know, of guilt and apology and just all of that, just going through just that one look, that's that's something as us actors, I think, strive for, like just conveying so much with so little. And Chaplin nailed it as someone who's so known for his physical comedy. He has the range, as Tom says. He has the range and diverse, and just he goes all over the place. So but yeah, there's just so much to say that I like about that. But those sequences are definitely my favorite in the film for sure.
You mentioned the ending. I mean, before we get to the ending, I want to point out, I was saying all the stuff about Chaplin taking gags from his earlier films and escalating them in this.
Mm-hmm.
That, what you were talking about, of him almost falling into the hole, and I don't know if you felt this
Yeah.
too, Tom, because it's been a while since we watched it, but that's one of the few ones where he really escalates the gag later, because that whole thing of like the tramp precariously about to fall over the ledge, he brings back tenfold in modern times during the roller
Yeah.
skating scene in the store,
Yep.
where he's
Yeah.
rolling back and almost falls off the ledge. To the ending, Jay, you mentioned him as an actor. I think about that a lot because I always think about in An Actor Prepares, the first Stanislavski book. He tells that story because for anybody who hasn't read it, you're never prepared for the fact that Stanislavski's acting books are novels written from the perspective of one of his students. It's really fucking weird. It's really weird. But he has that anecdote that I love. I always think about, which is the teacher comes to class one day, puts down a chair, and tells all the students, your job is you've got a minute or 5 minutes or whatever it is. He picks an amount of time. He goes, sit in that chair and make it interesting. And so a bunch of students go up and just kind of, they flop in the chair or they mope in the chair and they're moving their arms and they're flailing and they're doing a million things. And every time the teacher's like, wrong, wrong, wrong. And finally a student goes up and just sits in the chair, picks a spot and stares at it and just lets their face kind of move and morph. And they say, well, that was the most interesting moment. And I think when you're talking about Chaplin and that ending scene, I think that's a testament to that because on the one hand, like Chaplin is absolutely conveying things with his face. There's no argument to that. It's not like he's doing a Buster Keaton stone face. But there is a little bit of a Kuleshov effect there, I think, for all of us as the viewers, because whatever your vibe has been this whole movie, right? I love, Jay, that you said, he's apologetic, right? I love the fact that, like, for me, when I watched that scene this time, I was like, oh, I'm seeing how afraid he is that, she's going to look at him and reject him. And I love that you're watching the same footage. We're all watching the same footage and seeing the same faces. And your takeaway on that, which is so great, is that he's not even sad. He's apologetic. Like, he's sorry. He feels bad that for her, that the guy who helped him. I love that. So to that degree, Tom, you look at that ending. What are you feeling when you see that ending? Especially because this was your first time seeing.
I'm feeling like almost a little like what Jay is saying in that he's kind of sorry. I guess not even sorry. He's just embarrassed. He knew at some point the ruse was going to have to end with he was trying to get her money so she could get the eye surgery, and he knew the ruse was at some point going to end, but to have it end at such a low point where he, like I said, he looks worse than before. His clothes are falling apart. He's dirty. He's being ridiculed by kids that are selling newspapers on the corner. Like, so it's not even like apologetic. It's just he's embarrassed. It's almost like he wouldn't blame her for not wanting to be with him after seeing him like this, where it's just like, fuck, all right. The dream is over, but, I can't be mad at you.
The thing I love about this ending, I think it's one of the greatest endings in cinema. And I think one thing is, it's a very satisfying ending, despite the fact that it's impressively ambiguous, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing in the scene to actually make you think they wind up together or anything. The conclusion is not they wind up together. The conclusion is she accepts him for who he is. That doesn't mean they're going to wind up together. That she may not even see him again. But she got to see him once. And I think, to bring it back to Manhattan, which we'll talk about in the future season, like, I always feel like that's something people miss about the ending of Manhattan, is that it's a response to that and kind of lampooning that almost in a way. I mean, there's a naive reading of Manhattan, which, maybe it is. Maybe that's how he meant it, which is like, well, him and Mariel Hemingway are going to end up together. But he's replicating the shots of the ending of City Lights. But instead of her saying, I can see you, it's Mariel Hemingway going, I'm going away. I'm going to Europe to study acting. But, it's you got to just, Isaac, we'll be fine. You just got to have faith in people. And you've got his optimistic face, but like if you listen to what she's saying, she's certainly not giving him any kind of a positive answer there. And I think that's, when I hear people talk about Manhattan, and again, maybe I'm wrong. This has just always been how I've read the film. Like, that's a critique more than an optimistic ending. And the same thing with City Lights. Like, it is a romance, but it's also a romance in the broader sense, right? It's the essay in the Criterion booklet, which I'm gonna cite the author now, so I don't feel bad that I didn't say it sooner. But in the Criterion booklet, Gary Giddens talks about how the movie describes itself as a romance and pantomime, but when he says romance, it doesn't mean romance necessarily in just love story, but in the broader kind of Nathaniel Hawthorne sense of, a romance meaning like a blend of the real and the fantastical in some way, right? A comparison they draw is that in 1929, Magnificent Obsession gets published and has a similar like blindness can be cured subplot or not subplot, but like similar blindness can be cured conceit. And the Giddens points out like Chaplin could have very easily satirized that because the idea, it's very silly, right? Especially in the novel, the ending of Magnificent Obsession is very silly with the blinding the sight. With her going, oh, blessed God, I can see. Chaplin could have easily lampooned that, and it's admirable for the fact that instead he decides to play it sincerely in this movie and kind of respond to critics who might go, you expect me to believe that a doctor in Vienna can just cure blindness for free? Chaplin's response is essentially, yes, I expect you to believe it because this is a movie where I expect the audience to come in and believe the things that the movie's saying. Which I think is the central challenge of all this. But I think he does so brilliantly. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to add about City Lights before we wrap up with our Oscar talk?
I know this has been repeated, but there's an impressive amount of restraint shown in City Lights in terms of what they show with emotions, and I think again, I'm gonna bring it back as from an actor's perspective. You want to let the audience do the work for you in a sense, and this is a testament to that final scene, which we fill in what we're feeling, and in that sense, I feel like it's probably the most ambiguous and the most, in a sense, interactive movie Chaplin has made with the audience. Like he lets the audience fill in the blanks, and it just goes to show that he was definitely ahead of his time. He was ahead of his time, and again, there's like Manhattan filmmakers he's influenced, like Woody Allen. I think he's even influenced movies like The Graduate, with these ambiguous endings. Do you like The Graduate, Mike? Is that The Graduate?
I'm vaguely familiar. I think I've seen it once or twice. A couple times. That's like asking Tom if he's seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. On this podcast, we're just doing a drinking game at this point,
Exactly.
Giving the audience alcohol poisoning.
Right. No, just continue. Like, Chaplin's way ahead of his time, and he's done a lot. He's done a lot for cinema, and this is a testament to that. But,
I was just gonna say, like, I think that's kind of the thing that separates the good art from the bad art is treating your audience with enough respect to let them figure things out on their own. And I've been catching up on How Did This Get Made recently, and that's like a common thing they bring up with each movie they talk about. A lot of them, at least. Sometimes a movie's just incompetent, and that's whatever. But like, a common thing they talk about is how so many movies treat the audience like fucking morons, and they have to add scenes or dialogue or whatever, which is just to hold the audience hand and explain them. And by doing that, you're constantly just kneecapping yourself. You're breaking the illusion. And this movie never does that. This movie, it it's a silent movie, so it's physical comedy and all that, but it's just it ends on that moment, and it has that moment where it's just like, yeah, figure it out yourself. You don't need us to tell you what's gonna happen to these two.
Yeah.
However you see the
Eh,
world is how you're gonna think this ending is. That's gonna inform it. We don't need to hold your hand here, and that's something that I think we see in basically all the movies we talk about on this show. I mean, to the point where sometimes it causes issues with the movies we talk about because sometimes movies are too subtle. People read them in bad faith, and I think Manhattan's one of them. I know Gone with the Wind is one that I never saw until we did it on this show, and I remember going like, yeah, I don't like the movie, but it's not because of these things that everybody's been trying to tell me my whole life. It's not what you guys are telling me. It's just kind of like boring.
That's I love to bring that up to people with Gone with the Wind specifically. You and I talked about it on the podcast. I love to bring up, like, do you know that 1939 movie has a scene where somebody goes, well, the prison industry is essentially just modern slavery. In 39! They say that in that movie.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I think it's just kind of a conversation that's happening a lot in cinema and film fandom these days, which is so many people want movies to just spell everything out for them. They want them to be moral arbiters and tell them what's good, what's not. Let me know what I'm supposed to feel. And they keep not realizing that they say they want that, but then when a movie does that, they think it's bad because, well, it is bad. We don't want didactic, emotional propaganda. We want something we can work out ourselves, something we can, when we're walking to the car with our friends or our loved ones, we can talk about the movie and what did you feel about the movie? Because I don't know if anyone walked out of the first screening or whatever screening of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood like I did and came out feeling like this is a movie about how no matter how low you are important to someone in the world, whether you know it or not. I don't know if anybody thought that way, but I certainly did. But that's not something Quentin patted you on the head and say, oh, that's the pat little message of the movie.
Well, even Chaplin, I mean, he didn't, the test screenings he did a first test screening where the audience seemed kind of confused because they were just kind of like, am I supposed to laugh? Am I supposed to feel something? I don't know. And I think that's kind of the problem now with Chaplin's legacy is like when you hear people do the Chaplin-Keaton debate, which doesn't need to be a debate, but when you hear people do it, they're like, well, Chaplin's works are so saccharine, it's not the pure laughs of Keaton. And it's like, are we afraid to feel things? Like, and I get it. Like, there is a bit of embarrassment. One of the times I rewatched City Lights, I happened to be with my parents, and I was like, well, why don't we all just watch it? And it was a great moment because you kind of like, especially my father was watching it with me, and by the end he goes, you really forget how much you can do without words. Like, it's powerful. You get swept up in it.
Yeah.
But I'm watching it and that ending, and I'm getting choked up, and I'm trying to like hold it back because in my head I'm just like, you don't want to tell people you cried at the end of a comedy, but it gets you there. And I think that we'd maybe be a bit better off if we could just go like, that's okay to want. That is okay to want to go to a thing and feel a number of different feelings.
I just want to say also that an acting teacher also told me this before. He said that if you want to try to, instead of trying to cry within a scene to make it emotional, try not to cry. Just let the audience just cry for you, and that's exactly I think what Chaplin did. And just one more thing, I want to shout out Virginia Sherrill was also really good in this movie.
Yes,
she was. Played a very, very believable blind person, and she also showed a surprising amount of restraint within her performance. She didn't make it look like a stereotypical blind, character. So that I really was appreciated as well. So all around, great performances, great directing from Chaplin, and the gags obviously hold up today as well. So yeah.
And I think they with Virginia, like you said, they also do a great thing where they choose to have her staring straight forward, wide-eyed and unblinking throughout the film, so that when we cut to the flower shop after she's got her surgery, just by virtue of her with her head looking downward, we already know she can see. Right?
Yeah.
Before you do any visual cues of her looking at something or anything like that, it's just that you've broken the visual language of her. and that tells us something has changed.
Hmm.
So, as we wind down, as we always do, Tom, how do you think City Lights did at the Academy Awards?
Boy, I don't know. Probably got nominated for I'll say 3 things, and I don't know, picture, director, and I don't know. I can't say sound. I don't know.
So you
Production
think
design.
3? Okay, 3 picture, director, production design. Interesting. Most times, Tom, you just blanket answer 0, and then it got nominated for things. This is the one time 0 applies, and you didn't pull it.
Oh,
Yeah,
fuck.
City Lights
What?
completely screwed. Now, here's what's interesting about that.
What?
Right? We touched on lightly Chaplin's previous film, Circus. Right? The Circus had originally been nominated for picture, director, actor, and I believe screenplay at the very first Academy Awards. That was what it was nominated for, those categories, the very first Academy Awards. It had all of its nominations revoked. And instead, Chaplin was just presented with a special Oscar, an honorary Oscar, for The Circus in general. The reason that happened is that the Academy was afraid that Chaplin was going to sweep the categories, and it would look very bad for them if at their very first award ceremony, Charlie Chaplin won every one of their statues, basically. So they took that all away, and they gave him an honorary Oscar for The Circus. And I have to wonder if there's some residual feeling of that when we skip ahead like 3 years for City Lights. So yes, City Lights completely shut out, was not nominated for any Oscars. Chaplin himself would not get nominated again until the 42 re-release of The Gold Rush, and then in the 70s for Limelight, and then he gets his honorary in 77. He was not nominated for any Oscars. For clarification, the Best Picture nominees that year were East Lynne, The Front Page, Skippy, Trader Horn, and the winner for Best Picture, Cimarron.
Wow.
Now, of those films, only The Front Page is in the National Film Registry. That is the film that the play adapted into that film. It's later adapted into His Girl Friday, which is the better remembered version of that story. Skippy, notable just for having Jackie Coogan in it. And Trader Horn, notable for the
Skippy!
Trader Horn, notable for the fact that shoot was a nightmare. It was so bad that Edwina Booth, the lead actress, contracted a career-ending illness while filming in Africa and sued MGM for it.
Wow.
Yeah, fair enough.
Wow.
So, we're not going to nominate City Lights, but we'll nominate the bad, racist African hunter movie that almost killed a person. I don't know, Academy, you were weird in 31. Jay, thank you so much for joining us.
Just in 31?
Yeah, they've gotten it right every other time, Jay. Every other time they've gotten it right. Not one issue once.
Academy's always right.
I know for a fact everybody on my block is still telling me to watch Green Book and Coda. Get it right every time down at the local watering hole, as Tom says. Not to steal your bit, Tom, but
don't you steal my bit, you fucking.
I mean, listen, we
know
you've moved
dog shit.
You've moved on from down at the watering hole to your new recurring bit, which is we used to be a country.
Well, in this case, we didn't used to be a country because they fucked it up back in the 30s, and they keep fucking it up now.
Jay,
no Dracula, no Frankenstein, no fucking City Lights. What a bunch of humps.
Jae
Kim, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for coming back on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. Yeah, this was dope.
Of course, this was a pleasure.
Do you have anything you want to plug on the way out? Either projects, socials, anything?
Sure. Yeah, no. Thank you for giving me the platform. I mean, as actors, obviously, we're always trying to get ourselves out there. So, can try to do some shameless plugs. I'm in a show actually called Artificial Factions, which is on Twitch. Actually, it's an Emmy Award nominated show, actually Emmy winning show and a Peabody winning show. I play a virtual character there. Actually, I wore a whole green screen suit and I played like a video game character. Had to do a lot of physical comedy. Thank you, Chaplin, for helping me with that. But no, it's not easy. It's not easy to do all this physical comedy with. So a lot of respect to anyone who does acting in video games. It is a whole new other form of media that's coming up. And so check me out on Artificial. It's on Twitch. And I'm also prepping for a short film called Vanguard, which is coming out, which is going to be on Festival Run probably the end of this year. It's going to be a horror film, my first horror film ever. And
Hell yeah.
no, it's going to be super fun. They're going to try to, it's kind of in the vein of Smile, where they're trying to make it a short film and make it into a whole feature after they sell the short film. So hopefully it does well. I know we're in the midst of a strike right now. I'm also just want to shout out this that I'm with the writers, and I know that the SAG is also striking as well right now. I mean, this is a time for change, and this is a time that we need to support the people who really are bringing us, the shows and movies that we love, I think. And I mean, without writers, I have nothing to say, literally. So just want to show my solidarity with that, and with the SAG as well, SAG, and that's about it. And I also directed Shadow Play as my 2011 in college. If you want to check that out, somewhere it's online. I don't know.
It's
Mike Vitale.
Yeah, it's uploaded on YouTube. What if we put it up on the show's YouTube channel? Jay, we have a YouTube channel for the podcast now, and we also have a TikTok, and it's very confusing what these young people respond to. Tom does well on TikTok. I don't, but Tom does. It's very strange.
Oh.
It's
I
really
follow
strange.
Tom on TikTok.
No, as in the show's TikTok, the ones that involve Tom do better than the ones that involve me. We haven't figured it out yet.
Well, Tom's a national treasure in my eyes.
So Jay, we'll put all that in the notes. You were also in a LinkedIn commercial, right?
Yeah, I was in a LinkedIn commercial. Yeah, Mike told me that he saw me on LinkedIn.
So I need to note that.
That was pretty cool.
I just saw Jae Kim one day and went, "What the fuck?" Okay.
Yeah, commercials definitely pay the actors' bills. They pay a lot more than streaming shows these days.
Jae Kim, thank you so much for joining us. This was really great. We hope you'll. We'd love to have you come back on the show again. Whenever you're not busy acting in movies or Twitch series or getting married. Apparently, like if you can find some time amidst that schedule, we hope you'll come back. Jay, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody else, stick around. We'll be right back with our picks for the National Film Registry.
The National Film Registry isn't some fixed object, frozen in time. It's always growing, adding new titles every year. These annual selections are made by the National Film Preservation Board, with members and representatives from organizations like the Academy, the DGA, and the AFI coming together to debate and decide. But they don't just pull titles out of thin air. They pull from the public, people like you and me, who can submit their nominations for the registry in the form on the Library of Congress's website. What we do, at the end of every episode, is have Mike and Tom pick films not yet in the registry that they feel should be, inspired by that day's topic. At the end of each season, those films will be formally submitted to the National Film Registry for consideration on behalf of You're Missing Out. The only criteria? It must be an American film that's at least 10 years old. Here are today's picks.
So it was, it's funny. When I was prepping for this whole season in general, I had a number of films that I considered for a registry pick. Based on just the general themes of City Lights, the romantic comedy aspects, the ending. And then leading up to us actually doing this episode, I decided to catch up on all the Chaplins I had never seen. And I was struck by a film of his that I had heard about for years, and I had seen portions of, but never actually seen in full. And I became so enamored with this film that I immediately bought the Criterion Blu-ray. I've watched it again since. And it's the last great film Chaplin ever made, which is 1952's Limelight. Now, this is obviously, after a lot of his troubles, and it's him talking as the great clown Calvero, who is on his last legs and trying to help a young ballerina with mental illness issues, which is obviously tying into his own actual mother. He makes Calvero look like the tramp. It's remarkable. It didn't get its due in its day, because at this point, it was, at that time in 52, it was boycotted because of Chaplin's alleged communist ties and all of that. Though, of course, it did get a re-release in 72, where its score actually won an Oscar that year at the Academy Awards. It's an incredible film. A lot of people tell you it's his most personal. and deeply moving. Limelight is an incredible film on its own, and I think on its own, just as a film, I would want it to be in the registry of the several Chaplins that aren't in that I think need to be in. But it is also significant and needs to be in, even if the movie itself wasn't good. It is the only time that Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin share scenes in a film. Buster Keaton has a 1-scene or technically 2-scene cameo as Calvero's old comedy partner. And you get to see them doing shtick together. And it's so good. Limelight is an extraordinary film that didn't get its due in its day, but I think absolutely deserves a place in the National Film Registry. And if folks have not seen Limelight, if you are enjoying anything Chaplin-wise and you have already gone through the heavy hitters of modern times, City Lights, Great Dictator, what have you, don't ignore Limelight just because it's not The Tramp or just because it's late-stage Chaplin. I implore you. Like, this isn't King in New York or Countess in Hong Kong. Like, Limelight is an absolutely extraordinary film and deserves a place in the registry.
So this was another one where I had a few options, and I was thinking about it from a bunch of different angles, but then, honestly, it came up during this conversation. It hit me what the movie should be, and I checked the registry to make sure I wasn't mistaken that this movie wasn't in, and it's not. I am stunned this movie's not in. I'm stunned this filmmaker only has one movie in the registry. I just went through his IMDb. I think he should have like 8 movies in the fucking registry. The fact that he's only got one is fucking silly to me. And this movie, in one key way, well, 2 key ways, but one really specific to this movie, is that it is a love story, but it is a love story told kind of coming at it from a different angle. It's not coming at it straight away. And the real thing that kind of struck me as why it should be paired with City Lights is the ending. Baby, you're gonna miss your flight. Before sunrise, before I'm fucking messing it. It's before sunset. The second in Richard Linklater's Before trilogy. Maybe his best movie, and that's the thing, like I said, he should have like 8 movies in the registry. Like, the fact that Dazed and Confused, none of the Before movies are in, Boyhood's not in, School of Rock's not in. I think when it's eligible, Everybody Wants Some should be in, because that is as good as Dazed and Confused, the spiritual sequel. But I mean, one of our premier American independent filmmakers should be much more represented in this registry. And this movie is just fucking brilliant. It has that same kind of melancholy love story to it. It has the benefit of being a sequel, so you have this shared history. But you have this brilliance of it's in real time. It's just them walking and talking. They're not cutting around and spending the night like they did in the first one, where it's over like a 12-hour period. Real time. You're getting these emotions from them about, we shared this time. I thought you were the one. I haven't stopped thinking about you. I'm married. I have a kid. I wrote a fucking book about the time we spent together. She's telling him about her life and that she's thought about him. But we've grown, we have our own lives. What do we do? And then just ending at that moment, baby, you're gonna miss your flight. And you just go, fuck, we needed this. We as a country needed this. We needed Jesse and Celine to get back together. And no matter where they were in life in 2004, to say, we're going to be together like we should have been 9 years ago. I mean, Jesus Christ. It's a perfect trilogy. It's maybe the best trilogy that exists. It might be the best of the trilogy. I sometimes lean towards Before Midnight because of the honesty and the roughness that a relationship can have over 10 years. But fuck. And just, I feel like these endings are so similar in that ambiguity, leaving you, where is it going to be? Are they going to drop everything and change their lives and be together? Blah, blah, blah. We didn't know they were going to do the 9 years again, the 9 years later sequel again. So we're like, what? Are they going to? It's just, it's a perfect movie. It's a crime it's not in the registry. And I do think it does share some DNA with City Lights. So Before Sunset is my pick. What a fucking movie.
Let's all go to the lobby.
Thank you again to Jae Kim for joining us. Next week, we're discussing the 1968 documentary High School with current high school teacher Celia Blum. Don't forget to follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again next time. Here on You're Missing Out.
They honor movies of historical, cultural, or aesthetic importance on the National Film Registry.